Picture a city of red brick and cobblestone, where sailing ships crowd the riverfront and the smell of fresh tobacco drifts through narrow streets. That is Philadelphia in the mid-1700s. It was the largest city in North America, a bustling port town of merchants, craftsmen and churchgoers. But beneath all that everyday bustle, something extraordinary was brewing. Over the next 2 decades, this one city would spark a revolution, declare independence from the most powerful empire on earth, and then write the rulebook for an entirely new kind of government. With the help of AI, let us walk through it, year by year, and watch it all unfold. Our story begins in 1765, when Philadelphia had roughly 23,000 people packed into its streets. Merchants ran warehouses stuffed with grain and tobacco, artisans hammered away in their shops, and grand churches stood shoulder to shoulder with crowded taverns. It was a prosperous place, but the mood was shifting. The French and Indian War had just ended, and Britain needed money to pay off its enormous war debt. Parliament's solution was the Stamp Act, a brand new tax on paper, newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards. For Philadelphians, that word tax hits like a punch to the gut. Now here is where things got heated. On the very night before the act took force, thousands of Philadelphians gathered at the Liberty Pole near 2nd and Pine Streets, demanding action. The next day, the Colonial Assembly met at City Tavern, while an angry mob tried to drag Governor Penn's deputy into the street. William Bradford, publisher of the Pennsylvania Journal, and one of Benjamin Franklin's closest allies, made a dramatic stand. He suspended his newspaper entirely rather than pay the tax, slapping a skull and crossbones stamp right on the title page and declaring, "Dreadful, dismal, doleful, dolorous and dolorless days ahead." And the resistance only grew from there. On September 16th, a massive crowd gathered at the State House, which we now call Independence Hall, to protest. When the hated stamp paper finally arrived aboard the ship Sardwain on October the 5th, protesters surrounded the docked vessel and blockaded it from unloading a single sheet. They had even cornered the stamp distributor John Hughes and forced him to swear publicly that he would never enforce the tax. Philadelphia was drawing a line in the sand, and there was no going back. The pressure worked. Within months, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, and on May 19, 1766, Philadelphia erupted in celebration. Crowds poured into the streets, bonfires were lit, and taverns overflowed with toasts to liberty. But underneath the festivities, something had permanently changed. Merchants who had once avoided trouble were now signing boycott agreements. Polite drawing room debates had turned into full-throated street protests. Even Benjamin Franklin, freshly returned from London, could see how deeply divided people had become over Britain's authority. The celebration was real, but so was the tension. Philadelphia had tasted resistance, and it would not forget the flavour. Peace did not last. Starting in 1767, Parliament passed the Townshend Acts, slapping new taxes on tea glass, lead, paint and the paper. Philadelphians were furious all over again. The city's merchants signed non-importation agreements, pledging to refuse British goods entirely. Local lawyers, shopkeepers and craftspeople formed committees of safety to enforce the boycotts and keep everyone in line. A famous satirical piece in the Pennsylvania Journal even nicknamed George III the Oil King for taxing oils and wines. This was a city living on the edge. Everyday people were talking politics everywhere, in taverns over the mugs of ale, in homes around the dinner table, and in church gatherings after Sunday services. Philadelphia was becoming a hotbed of revolutionary thinking, and the British had no idea how deep it ran. Then in December 1773, news arrived from Boston that colonists had dumped an entire shipload of tea into the harbour. The Boston Tea Party electrified Philadelphia. Residents held their own mass meetings, and when a tea ship called the Polly tried to dock in Philadelphia that same month, a committee of citizens turned it away before it could even unload. The message was clear. Philadelphia stood with Boston, and the colonies were starting to act as one. By September 1774, the situation had reached a boiling point. Representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies travelled to Philadelphia for what became known as the First Continental Congress. They met inside Carpenter's Hall, a sturdy brick building constructed by the city's own Carpenters Guild. Delegates like John Dickinson and Joseph Galloway from Pennsylvania sat alongside firebrand Samuel Adams from Massachusetts and the respected Peyton Randolph from Virginia, who served as president of the Congress. Behind those heavy wooden doors, men spoke in low, urgent tones about their rights as British subjects and whether those rights were worth fighting for. They did not vote for independence. Not yet, but they took bold steps. They agreed to a complete boycott of British trade and urged every colony to begin forming local militias. Charles Thompson, a Philadelphia-born radical and respected community leader, served as secretary and kept meticulous minutes of every session. When the delegates finally left the city, they carried with them a unified sense of purpose that had never existed before. Philadelphia had become the beating heart of colonial resistance. Then came the moment that changed everything. In April 1775, British soldiers and colonial militia clashed at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. The first shots of the American Revolution had been fired, and news travelled to Philadelphia within days. The city reacted with a volatile mix of fear and defiance. This was no longer about taxes or boycotts, this was war. Philadelphia moved fast. On May 10, 1775, the Second Continental Congress convened at the State House. The delegates who gathered this time knew the stakes were life or death. Benjamin Franklin, the world-famous philosopher and statesman, took his seat alongside John Adams, John Hancock, and dozens of others. Together, they made a decision that would reshape the continent. They voted to create a Continental Army and named George Washington of Virginia as its commander-in-chief. Washington accepted the role and departed for Massachusetts to take command of the ragged forces gathered outside Boston. Meanwhile, back in Philadelphia, a recently arrived Englishman named Thomas Paine was quietly working on something that would prove just as powerful as any army. By the end of 1775, Paine had turned months of tavern conversations and street corner arguments into a written masterpiece. He called it Common Sense. When Common Sense hit the printing presses in January 1776, it landed like a thunderbolt, written in plain, straightforward English that any farmer or shopkeeper could understand. Paine's pamphlet argued that the colonies had no reason to remain under a king's rule. "It's time to party," he wrote, and those 4 words captured what thousands had been feeling but could not quite say. The pamphlet sold over 100,000 copies in its first few months alone, an astonishing number for a city of this size. Suddenly, independence was not just a whisper among well-educated intellectuals, it was on every lip, in every tavern, and on every street corner in Philadelphia. The momentum was now unstoppable. In early June 1776, Congress appointed a committee of 5 to draft a formal Declaration of Independence. Then came one of the Revolution's most dramatic moments. On July 1st, the vote for independence was deadlocked. Delaware's delegation was split, and it looked like the measure might stall. But Caesar Rodney, a Delaware delegate suffering from ill health, rode 80 miles through a thunderstorm overnight to reach Philadelphia in time. He arrived mud-splattered and exhausted on July 2nd, cast his vote in favour, and tipped Delaware's delegation toward independence. That same day, Congress officially voted to break from Britain. 2 days later, on July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence inside the State House. Philadelphia exploded with joy. Bonfires blazed in the streets, church bells rang for hours, and citizens celebrated long into the night. The city that had been simmering with rebellion for over a decade had finally made it official. America was born and Philadelphia was its birthplace, but independence did not mean safety. The British Army had every intention of crushing the rebellion, and Philadelphia was their prize target. By September 1777, British General William Howe advanced on Philadelphia after defeating Washington at Brandywine. Congress fled, stopping briefly in Lancaster before moving to York, Pennsylvania. On September the 26th, British troops entered the city. Loyalists cheered as the Redcoats occupied the streets, shops shut, homes emptied, and the once defiant city fell silent. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Washington's army endured a harsh winter at Valley Forge, battling cold, disease, and hunger, while holding on to hope. Then came the turn. The American victory at Saratoga in late 1777 convinced France to enter the war on America's side. That alliance changed the entire calculus. By June 1778, the British decided that holding Philadelphia was no longer worth the cost. They evacuated the city and marched back toward New York. Congress returned and Philadelphia slowly came back to life. The occupation had been painful, but it had not broken the city's spirit. If anything, those dark months had forged Philadelphians into something harder and more determined than before. The war dragged on for several more years, but by 1783 it was finally over. The Treaty of Paris was signed in France in September, formally ending hostilities. Then on December 4th, 1783, Congress in Philadelphia signed a proclamation of peace, officially acknowledging the United States as a free and sovereign nation. However, peace brought new problems. The Articles of Confederation proved too weak as states argued over trade, money, and power. In May 1787, 55 delegates met in Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention, held in secrecy behind closed doors. George Washington presided, while Benjamin Franklin attended despite poor health. A young James Madison arrived with a bold plan for a stronger government. For months they debated representation and authority. On September 17, 1787, the Constitution was signed. After ratification in 1788, celebrations filled Philadelphia, marking the rise of a new republic. Philadelphia's journey from 1765 to 1787 is one of the most remarkable transformations in history. In just over 2 decades, it went from a prosperous but restless colonial port to the very place where American independence was declared and the Constitution was written. Its cobblestone streets saw merchants become revolutionaries, townsfolk become statesmen, and bold ideas become the foundation of a nation. And through all of it, the soul of the city remained what it had always been. A blend of hard-working practicality and fearless, forward-thinking ambition. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to drop your suggestions for the next video in the comments below. See you next time.